Three separate reports from three different power centers inside the Tinubu administration, all of them about one man, his own minister, the man who helped put him in Aso Rock, the man who broke ranks with his own party, burned bridges with lifelong allies, and staked his entire political future on Bola Tinubu winning the 2023 presidential election. So here is the question that nobody in Nigerian media is asking loudly enough. If Nyesom Wike is Tinubu's most powerful ally, why is the presidency reportedly receiving security intelligence about him? And what does that tell you about what is actually happening in the shadows of Nigeria's 2027 race? Stay with me, because the answer changes everything you think you know about this alliance. Before we go further, if you're new here, Naija Update 24/7 exists for one reason: to give every Nigerian, wherever you are, whatever region you're from, the political analysis that mainstream media won't touch. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This gets deeper. To understand where we are, you need to understand where this started. In 2023, Nyesom Wike did something that shocked Nigerian politics. As a sitting PDP governor and one of the party's most powerful figures, he refused to support his own party's presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar. Instead, he led a group called the G5 Integrity Group, 5 PDP governors, and openly backed Bola Tinubu of the APC. They were threatened with expulsion. They were called traitors. They did not blink. Tinubu won. And in the mathematics of Nigerian political reward, Wike received the most consequential appointment available, Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. The man now controls Abuja. He controls land allocations, road contracts, the physical and symbolic infrastructure of Nigeria's seat of power. That was the deal, even if nobody wrote it on paper. But deals in Nigerian politics have a shelf life, and this one began to expire almost immediately. By late 2023, Wike had turned his attention back to Rivers State, the state he governed for 8 years, the state where he built his political empire, and the state which governorship he had handed over to his chosen successor, Siminalayi Fubara. What followed was one of the most damaging political feuds in Nigeria's democratic history. Lawmakers loyal to Wike initiated impeachment proceedings against Fubara. The courts were flooded with cases. Abuja and Port Harcourt became theaters of a conflict that was deeply personal but had national consequences. President Tinubu intervened in December 2023. A truce was brokered. It collapsed in less than 4 weeks. Tinubu intervened again. It collapsed again. On March 18, 2025, he took the most dramatic step available to him under the Constitution. He declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, suspending Governor Fubara's executive powers for 6 months. That decision remains one of the most debated uses of Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution in the democratic era. The emergency eventually ended, but the peace it was supposed to produce never arrived. In February 2026, Tinubu summoned both men to the presidential villa for the 4th time. They were reportedly seen living together. Many Nigerians exhaled, and then within weeks, Wike was back in Rivers State, not to govern, not to reconcile, but to campaign. 17 days, 23 local government areas, and a public vow that Governor Fubara will not be re-elected in 2027. That is the trigger. A serving minister of the federal government moving across a state he does not govern, campaigning against a sitting governor who is now a member of the president's own ruling party. That is what brought us here. That is the question this video will answer. And before we go any further, here is something nobody has told you yet. Nyesom Wike is not a member of the APC. He holds no APC card. He is technically and formally still a PDP man. So when he says Rivers State is totally for Tinubu, he is saying it as a member of the opposition party. That is not a footnote. That is a constitutional and political absurdity sitting at the very heart of this entire story. Let us now examine the institutions involved, because this story is not just about personalities, it is about what happens when the rules are not clear enough to constrain powerful men. The first collision is between the FCT Ministry and the principle of elected state governance. Wike's role as FCT Minister gives him command over Nigeria's capital, its roads, its land, its federal allocations, and most importantly, its proximity to power. Every governor, every senator, every major political actor passes through Abuja. Wike sees them all. He hosts them all. That ministerial office has become a platform for national political mobilization in a way that no previous FCT minister has attempted so openly. But there is a constitutional reality that this arrangement cannot escape. The FCT minister is an executive appointee. He is not an elected officer. His mandate derives from the president who appointed him, not from any ballot. His political activities in Rivers State, a sovereign separately governed federation unit, sit in a zone where the law is ambiguous but the democratic principle is not. The second collision is inside the APC itself, and this one is particularly revealing. In January 2026, President Tinubu's own person speaker, Daniel Bwana, went on national television and stated plainly that Governor Fubara, not Nyesom Wike, is the APC leader in Rivers State. He noted that Wike is not a member of the APC and therefore cannot speak for the party in the state. Read that again carefully. The presidency's own communications team formally distanced itself from the man who claims to be Tinubu's most powerful mobilizer in the South-South. That is not a small thing. That is a public signal from inside Aso Rock that the Wike arrangement has limits and that those limits are being tested.
The third coalition is inside the PDP, and here the story becomes even more layered. In November 2025, the PDP attempted to hold a national convention in Ibadan, Oyo State. It ended in chaos. A court of appeal in Abuja affirmed a federal high court judgment that restrained the party from proceeding. Two parallel leadership factions emerged, one backed by Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed and one backed by Wike. Despite the court rulings, Wike's faction pressed forward. On March 29, 2026, they held their own national convention in Abuja at the Moshood Abiola Stadium, with over 2,000 delegates and prominent political figures including former Senate President Bukola Saraki and former Kaduna Governor Ahmed Makafi. A new national chairman and national secretary were elected. Wike now controls what his faction calls the legitimate PDP structure, while simultaneously mobilizing for the APC president. He is operating across two parties, inside one federal emergency's aftermath and against a governor who belongs to neither of the parties Wike is simultaneously manipulating. The constitutional ambiguity lives here. Nothing in Nigerian law explicitly prevents a minister from engaging in the politics of his own party. But there is a significant democratic question about whether the access, the resources, and the institutional weight of a federal ministry should be deployed to prosecute a personal political agenda in a state that recently emerged from a federal emergency. That question does not have a clean answer in the law books, but it has a very clear answer in the court of democratic principle. Now we move beyond what is happening to why it is happening, and this is where the analysis gets sharper. Wike's calculation is not what it appears to be on the surface. Most observers look at him and see a man who is loyal to Tinubu. That reading is too simple. Wike is not playing loyalty, he is playing architecture. He understands that his post-ministerial relevance, what he becomes after 2027, assuming Tinubu wins, depends entirely on Tinubu owing him something substantial. Not just gratitude, structural debt. The kind of debt that translates into influence over federal appointments, control over Rivers State political succession, and a commanding position in the rebuilt PDP structure. He has explicitly dismissed the idea of running for president himself, saying it would be unfair to contest against the man who appointed him. But that is not modesty, that is strategy. A man who runs and loses is finished. A man who makes himself indispensable to the winner controls the next chapter. Tinubu's dilemma is more complex than many appreciate. On paper, his position looks commanding. Following a wave of defections across 2025 and into early 2026, the APC now controls roughly 30 of Nigeria's 36 state governorships. That is structural dominance by any measure. But structural dominance is not the same as electoral security, and Wike's behavior in Rivers is complicating Tinubu's 2027 calculus in two very specific ways. First, it antagonizes Fubara, a governor who has since defected to the APC and whose cooperation Tinubu needs if he wants a clean South-South result in 2027. You cannot simultaneously embrace a governor and allow your minister to campaign against his re-election. That contradiction produces political noise that Tinubu cannot afford 11 months before a presidential election. Second, it sends a message about internal control. A president who has intervened 4 times in a conflict between his minister and a state governor without resolution does not project the kind of decisive authority that secures the confidence of swing voters and nervous coalition partners. Then there is the Seyi Makinde revelation, and this one deserves careful attention. Governor Makinde of Oyo State, who was once an ally of both Wike and Tinubu, made a serious allegation. He claimed that during a meeting at the presidential villa, Wike told President Tinubu directly that he would hold PDP for the president ahead of 2027. Wike denied it. He called Makinde frustrated. He said no such meeting produced no such promise. But Makinde's account, if it is accurate, points to something that goes beyond political rivalry. If a prominent political figure was attempting to deliver the main opposition party into the hands of the ruling administration, that is not an alliance. That is the structural blueprint of one-party dominance. And that should concern every Nigerian, regardless of which party they support, regardless of which region they come from. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. There are also stakeholders in this story who are not speaking publicly, but whose calculations matter enormously. Southern opposition governors are watching closely to see whether Tinubu will assert presidential authority over Wike, or whether ministerial impunity will be allowed to stand. Northern APC governors are quietly calculating whether a president distracted by a running rivers crisis can still hold the national coalition together. And the ADC coalition, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, former Labour Party candidate Peter Obi, and former Rivers Governor Rotimi Amechi, who came together in July 2025 specifically to prevent what they described as the risk of one-party dominance, receives fresh campaign material every single time Wike makes a controversial move. Here is the strategic irony that nobody has stated clearly enough. Wike's most aggressive pro-Tinubu actions are simultaneously making it harder for Tinubu to win Rivers State cleanly. Critics from within Rivers itself have argued that neither Wike nor Fubara can deliver the state to the APC in a genuinely free and fair election. If that assessment has any validity, then Wike is not an asset to the 2027 campaign. He is a liability wearing the uniform of loyalty. And there is one more element, a document. An alleged peace agreement reportedly signed during the Rivers emergency that Wike says exists and Fubara's camp disputes. I am going to come back to this, because if it is real, it changes every single calculation on the board. This is the point where some viewers may be tempted to conclude that this is a Rivers State story. It is not. It never was. Let me explain why every Nigerian in Kano, in Enugu, in Sokoto, in Lagos has a stake in what is unfolding. The Rivers emergency was the most dramatic use of Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution in the entire democratic era. No previous president has deployed this provision against a sitting governor in this manner. The aftermath, a federal minister actively challenging a sitting governor's right to seek re-election, creates a precedent that has no geographic boundary. If a minister can use federal proximity and institutional access to determine who governs a state, that principle does not stop at Rivers. It becomes available to any future administration in any state at any moment of political convenience. That question must be answered not for Rivers, but for Nigerian federalism itself.
The economic consequences are equally non-regional. Rivers State is an oil-producing state. When political instability persists in such an environment, the effects are not contained within state borders. Pipeline vandalism, which Tinubu himself cited as a security justification for the emergency declaration, directly affects Nigeria's crude output, which directly affects foreign exchange earnings, which directly affects the naira's value, which affects the price of every commodity in every market across all 36 states. The ordinary Nigerian filling a generator in Maiduguri or buying rice in Ibadan is living the downstream consequence of a political fight happening in Port Harcourt boardrooms and Abuja residencies. Rivers and Kano are currently experiencing the same structural phenomenon simultaneously. In Kano, Governor Abba Yusuf has fallen out with his former political godfather, Rabiu Kwankwaso, after defecting to the APC. In Rivers, Fubara has done the same with Wike. In both cases, the godfather has vowed to become a stumbling block to the governor's future. This is not coincidence. This is a systemic feature of Nigerian politics, the patron-client architecture that converts political loyalty into a form of debt bondage. What is being tested in Rivers is being watched by every governorship candidate in every geopolitical zone who hopes to govern independently of the man who made them. And now, the document I mentioned earlier. The alleged peace agreement reportedly signed during the Rivers state emergency. Here is its international dimension. If a sitting governor of Africa's most populous nation was pressured during a federally imposed suspension of his executive powers to sign away his constitutional right to seek re-election, that is precisely the kind of democratic regression that Western governments issue quiet diplomatic communications about. It would not come as a press conference. It would come as careful language in a State Department briefing or a UK Foreign Office statement. Watch for that language between now and December 2026. It will tell you something that the Nigerian press may not report. A credible analysis must engage the strongest arguments on the other side, so let us do that honestly. The first argument in Wike's favor is constitutional and personal. He is a democratically appointed public official exercising his legal right to participate in partisan politics within his own party. His support for Tinubu predates his ministerial appointment. He made that choice in 2023 as a political actor, not as a minister. Holding him to a standard of political silence that no Nigerian law requires would itself be a form of institutional overreach. That is a defensible argument, and it deserves to be taken seriously. The second argument is structural. The PDP crisis that Wike is navigating is not of his sole creation. The NWC had been warning members about anti-party conduct since at least August 2025. The party's own governance failures, its inability to hold a credible convention, its failure to manage internal ambitions, its collapse in multiple states created the vacuum that Wike is feeling. Attributing the entirety of the PDP's fragmentation to one man is analytically lazy, and it lets the party's institutional weaknesses escape scrutiny entirely. The third argument is governance-based. Wike's record in the FCT is concrete. Roads in Karu, Kubwa, and the Apo-Kashi corridor exist where they did not before. Satellite towns that Abuja residents had not seen developed in a generation are being transformed. Whatever criticism is leveled at his political conduct, dismissing him purely as a political disruptor erases a record of infrastructure delivery that is visible and verifiable.
Once again, kindly remember to subscribe to my channel. I understand it means nothing to you, but it means everything to me. This work of research and analysis cost me a lot, and the only means of paying me back is your subscription. Thank you. But here is the most dangerous misconception in this entire debate. It is the idea that this is a Rivers State problem. It is not. Rivers State is the arena. The problem is a governance and democratic accountability crisis that has chosen Rivers as its stage, and that will leave behind constitutional precedent and institutional weaknesses that outlast every individual in this story. The real question for every Nigerian, North, South, East, and West, is not whether Wike is right or wrong. It is whether Nigeria is building a democracy where ministerial office can be routinely deployed as a tool of personal political empire building, where a state's electoral future is contested not at a ballot box but in private residencies and emergency decrees. That question belongs to all of us. And consider this number before you answer. APC now controls roughly 30 of Nigeria's 36 state governorships. In that context, Wike's war in Rivers is not about personal rivalry. It is about whether the last meaningful opposition political infrastructure in the South-South collapses before 2027. That is the real strategic prize, and it is a prize with national consequences. What should you be watching in the weeks and months ahead? On Wike's side, expect the LGA-level mobilization to intensify. He has already established the renewed Hope Ambassadors infrastructure in Rivers, with zonal coordinators across all 23 local government areas, and he has stated explicitly that Tinubu supporters in Rivers do not need a sitting governor to mobilize. That is not bravado. It is a declaration that he is building a parallel political machine independent of Fubara's administration, designed to function with or without the cooperation of the state government. His next critical move will be in the courts and in INEC's offices, specifically the question of whether his faction's March 29 PDP convention will receive formal recognition. If INEC recognizes his faction's leadership, he controls which PDP structure appears on the 2027 ballot. That is enormous institutional power. On Tinubu's side, the presidency faces a choice it has been deferring for more than 2 years. Either it formally asserts presidential authority over Wike, which risks alienating the man who has staked his entire political future on Tinubu's re-election, or it continues to allow the Wike-Fubara dynamic to run, which risks the alienation of a sitting APC governor and the continuation of constitutional questions that have no clean resolution. A fifth presidential intervention in Rivers would not be reported as diplomacy. It would be reported as evidence that the presidency cannot govern its own political household. On the opposition side, the ADC coalition remains fragile. Informal Atiku, Obi, and Amaechi blocs persist beneath the surface of a coalition that has not yet found its unifying narrative. Every Wike controversy is a gift to them, but gifts do not win elections. Platform, organization, and a credible candidate do. So far, they have neither. Watch for 4 signals. First, whether INEC formally recognizes one PDP faction over the other. Second, whether Wike-aligned House of Assembly members in Rivers attempt to revive impeachment proceedings against Fubara. Third, whether the United States or the United Kingdom issues statements specifically referencing democratic governance concerns in Nigeria. And fourth, whether Tinubu moves to reshuffle his cabinet, because any such reshuffle would force a public decision about Wike's ministerial future that the presidency has so far been unwilling to make. Let us return to where we began. 3 separate reports from 3 different power centers inside the Tinubu administration, all of them about one man, his own minister. In a functional democracy, that is extraordinary. In Nigeria, as we have seen, it has become almost routine. The question was, if Nyesom Wike is Tinubu's most powerful ally, why is Aso Rock reportedly receiving security intelligence about him? The answer, after everything we have examined, is this. Wike is both an asset and a liability, and the Tinubu administration has not yet decided which of those truths it is willing to act on. He is an asset because he delivers political networks, fractures opposition structures, and provides South-South credibility that Tinubu cannot source elsewhere. He is a liability because every controversy he generates reminds Nigerians and international observers that even the President of the Federal Republic cannot fully govern the men he has empowered. The stumbling block in this story is not one man's ambition. It is older than Wike, it is older than Tinubu. It is the architecture of Nigerian politics itself, godfatherism, transactional loyalty, and the long-standing subordination of institutions to powerful individuals, now colliding in the most visible way possible with the democratic expectations of over 200 million Nigerians who want something genuinely different. The 2027 election will not only be a verdict on economic performance or security outcomes, it will be a verdict on whether this model of politics, this specific way of doing power in Nigeria, still works, whether Nigerians will accept it, reward it, or finally refuse it. Watch carefully, because the answer will shape this country for a generation. If this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one Nigerian who needs to understand what is really happening. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Naija Update 24/7. We never stop watching.